Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for November 18th, 2019. Number one, pursuant to Mass General Law, we're going to go into executive session to consider the purchase, exchange, lease value of property if the chair declares an open meeting may have be detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body, the Brown land at Tehadawin Road. We will come out of that and go right into our meeting, hopefully no later than 6:45 or 7. Need a motion?
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Subsection A, Clause 6, to convene an executive session to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body, subject to Brown land on Tehadawin Road.
Second. Motion been made and seconded. Ms. Napoli?
Aye.
Mr. DeCoste?
Aye.
Mr. Glavy? Aye. Mr. Knox? Aye. Thank you. We'll be back.
Go G Bears.
Yeah, quite a year.
It's been 4 years.
Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting. We just exited executive session. For the rest of the night, what we have on the agenda is at 6:30 is the organization Pledge of Allegiance and read the mail. Shortly after, department board updates, police department. We have appointments for reserve officer and part-time communication officer. Followed by public input and updates. 6:55, financial investigation updates. 7 o'clock, we talk about the tax rate coming up for the next year. 7:30, a joint meeting with the Littleton Housing Authority, appointment of tenant member, Ms. Sonia Lodge. 7:40, discuss steps of the Host Agreement Act, HCA negotiations with Community Care Collective, Littleton Apothecary, and G7 Laboratories. 8 o'clock, public hearing pursuant to Selectmen's Regulations and Policies, Chapter 8, Earth Removal Regulations, Section 6D for 64 Spectacle Pond Road, followed by the Town Administrator Selectmen's meeting scheduled for January through June, and to ratify the police chief's contract, followed by minutes. Nina, anything that you want to?
Thank you. For mail, we had a letter from the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development that the town's application for water main improvements to Russell Street through our Light and Water Department were not going to be recommended for funding, unfortunately. And a letter from Comcast regarding their Internet Essentials offering, which expands eligibility of the program for qualified low-income households. I have forwarded that information to our Elder and Human Services Department.
That's it. Mr. Clerk, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's see. Chief?
Cadence?
Police Department.
Good evening. Good evening.
James here, yeah.
Thank you for having us in tonight. I'd like to introduce you to James Marine. Jimmy is a local boy who graduated from Littleton High School and wanted to be a police officer for the longest time that I know. Went off to Claremont, and he's been a full-time police officer in Claremont, New Hampshire. He has the part-time police academy with us now, and he's here for appointment for part-time reserve officer.
Welcome.
Thank you, sir.
How are you going to work this out full-time and be a part-time here?
So the current schedule I'm on is a 12-hour rotating shift schedule, which gives us 82 extra days off per year. And like you said, my family lives down here. I'm here most of my days off anyway. So I figured while I'm here, might as well make a little money.
And support the department.
Exactly. Of course.
Questions for the board? How are you finding Claremont?
What's that?
How are you finding Claremont?
It's certainly an
Busy
interesting...
little town, right?
Yeah, very busy community. You wouldn't think so, just driving through, but very busy, very fun place to work. Yeah, I love it up there.
How far up is that?
It's like an hour, 45.
2.5.
Yeah, 2.
Who's driving?
Yeah. Not you.
Chuck, anything?
No, I'm appreciate you submitting your resume and being willing to come forward.
Thanks.
Well, I think this is gonna be kind of easy.
Move that the Board of Selectmen appoint James Marine as Reserve Officer for the Littleton Police Department.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Welcome.
Thank you.
What, Jess? We usually hug the tails from the way. Good luck, thank you.
I asked the chief and he didn't know. Are you related to the Marines from Harvard, like Ted Marine?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Good luck, oh boy.
Nothing he's aware of, so be
Like
very
the
careful
old-
how
the
you
old
said
Paul
that.
Money.
No, just, he used to be a selectman up there years ago. I go way back, remember that?
Priest.
Good evening.
Good evening, how are you?
Good.
Before you tonight, you have Danielle Priest. Danielle, I hate to say this, but I've known her since she was a baby. Danielle is a full-time dispatcher in air. As you know, it's very tough for us to fill part-time per diem positions, so we kind of look for other departments that have other full-time officers that are already fully trained. Danny actually reached out to us when she saw our posting and said she'd really like to come over here. She hears how busy we are with, the highways and the activity we have going on. She's all trained up, ready to go, and she would like to want to start training pretty soon.
Yeah, right away.
Just needs the blessing from the board.
How long you been with you?
About 2 years. And we're regional now, so we do Shirley as well.
And it's police and fire in there.
Yep, police, fire, and EMS.
Same computer system also.
Everything's the
as
same,
ours.
yeah.
That's great, so the transition will be
Oh, it would be
very
awesome, yeah.
smooth for you. That's
Yes.
great. Very good.
Any questions?
Not a lot of opportunity to use ASL during dispatch, but
That's actually the thing that jumped off your resume on me first. I'm excited to see somebody with those skills.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was gonna be my comment.
Didn't hurt that
to
it was
it.
at the top of the resume.
I know. No, that's really interesting, unique skill to have.
You ready for a motion, Joe?
Sure.
Yeah. Move that the Board of Selectmen appoint Danielle Priest as Communications Officer for the Littleton Police Department.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
welcome.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
And in case you didn't see or didn't hear, we have a car on the train tracks down Harvard Road.
What's wrong with me?
It's being removed as we speak.
Mr. Chairman, we're gonna do the chief's contract. Oh. Figure we can get it out of the way while you're
I don't
here.
know, do you guys still want to work for this guy? Or?
This is where you find out about him. We're gonna,
Jeff sneaks in the back door a little bit.
See that?
Heartbeat away.
so we all set with this?
Ready? Yep, ready for motion.
We just need to flip to. Oh, there we go. It's
Yeah.
down there. I was trying to find it. I'll move that the Board of Selectmen vote to ratify the police chief contract through June 30, 2021.
Second.
Motion
you
been
beat
made
me.
and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? No nays?
Just one for the measure.
Don't look at me.
I didn't say a word.
I think it was unanimous. I'm certain. Thank you, chief.
Thank you.
We'll do the rest of it.
You're gonna put a police officer at the tracks all the time now?
We talked to MBTA, but I'm posting the detail there.
In all honesty, do you think it's partly related to the fact that they just did work at that intersection and something about it makes it less visible now? Like,
I don't think so. I think it has a lot to do with distracted driving, it's not knowing where you're going. The last two times have been people coming out of Harwood and taking the left and taking the immediate
Swinging
left. and
all the way
swinging.
around.
Yeah, right in. So,
Right down the tracks.
it's very dark right now.
It's raining, yeah, it's
I'm not seeing it, right?
Foster
Like, I went
with all the
outside
black
just to see
pavement.
what
But
they
It's
tonight's,
treacherous
yeah,
right now.
tonight's accident though was kind of unique. I mean, she was probably 40 plus yards in. I mean, how do you not know when you drop off into the rocks and you go 40 yards in?
You think she thought she had a flat?
You just kind of.
Keep going. I'll get to the next intersection. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gee, thank you, I appreciate it.
All good.
Okay, item number 4, public input. Anything public input? Such a large audience. Come on, Mullen, you must have something to say.
Had to be.
Okay, members up. Lady?
I'm sure more will be said about this later, but Veterans Day was tremendous, and Cindy and John Borowski and the others who were involved in putting that all together did a terrific job. And on a personal note, I'm very happy that attention was given both to my dad and to John Whitcomb Hathaway as a pair, since they went through life essentially as a pair, starting in the hospital at Ayr in 1926, the first week of October, and they were the last 2 World War II veterans to leave Littleton for the war. So I thought you did a great job on that, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I actually did have another item too. This past Thursday, Nina and I and well, who else was part of it? Jim Carr from the Water Commissioners, Nick Lawler, and Vin Ragucci, and Cheryl, yes, too, all went into the State House. Representative Arcero, who was not able to attend, but arranged the room and had his staff there, and Senator Eldridge convened a meeting with decision makers from the EOEA, the Environmental Affairs Office, and DEP about trying to access some of the earmarked $6 million to our smart sewer project. I was very happy that they were very much on top of, they were eager to hear an update because they were, monitoring what we're looking to do, and they really want to promote it statewide. So, we had serious folks at the table, which was important. They want to know what we're doing, which is important, and hopefully we'll know in a few months' time a little bit better about what programs might be, the best way to access money to carry it along. But they're very supportive of what we're doing. They're also aware of the integration between the prospective sewer project and our master plan goals, and I was tickled, and you'll be tickled too, you two from the planning board, that a fellow from EOEA actually brought up form-based code before we brought it up. They know that they had made a grant to the town last year on giving us consulting services to perform, that study. So I was gratified that we weren't. We didn't have to start from ground zero to introduce them to what's going on in Littleton, and I think we have real partners there. So I don't know if Nina wants to add anything.
No, I think you covered it. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Just want to make some people aware that the Rotary luncheon, I'm not sure if we meet again before Thanksgiving, but the Rotary breakfast, rather, on Thanksgiving morning is actually happening on Thanksgiving morning. This year, there's been a little bit of a change where the football game against Air Shirley is going to be Wednesday evening. It's going to be a Wednesday night, a Thanksgiving Eve football game at 6 p.m. The thought is that more college students that are coming home from school and things can be able to make it, and it wouldn't interrupt people's schedules trying to get places on Thanksgiving Day, relative to staff and players and families and volunteers. But Rotary is still going to be holding their Thanksgiving breakfast. It is a big fundraiser. They're very supportive of the schools, and I believe it's, Anna, you could probably correct me on this, I think it's towards the education fund?
Yes, for the scholarship.
Right, for the scholarship fund. So, because the game's on Wednesday night, doesn't mean that the breakfast is not gonna happen on Thursday morning. So I just want to start getting that word out there and let people know.
Certainly. So I have a few things to talk about tonight. One of the things that I wanted to make the public aware of is that there is a affordable housing lottery going on right now at the Cooper Farm Estates, the over 55 community there. They have 3 two-bedroom homes that they are holding an affordable lottery for right now. So if people are interested, or if they know someone who may be interested in submitting an application for that lottery, there are applications at the clerk's office, in the library, as well as the town's website at townoflittletonma.org, that you can download and submit. And there's going to be an open house on Saturday, December 7th, between 11 and 12:30 PM at 20 Dean Lane, that will show prospective, anyone interested, what the home would look like.
20 Dean Lane is part of the Cooper Farm Estate.
Exactly. It's the affordable, it's the,
Off to the right, kind of
it's
behind
off to
Next
the right,
Generation,
exactly,
yeah.
because some people were like, oh, I didn't realize there
Those
was an
Dean
over
Lane.
55 component to that development, but there is. So I'm thrilled to see that they're holding an affordable housing lottery. The other thing I wanted to ask the board about was, it's come to my attention that the Senate and the House of Representatives recently enacted the Acts of 2018, which is an act relative to veterans' benefits, rights, appreciation, validation, and enforcement. And it may have changed some of the benefits that we offer as a town to our veteran community. So I was going to ask if the board had any interest in having, I don't know, if town council or the assessor's office at least take a look at this new legislation, just to see how we align, if there's any changes that we need to make on our end with respect to this recent legislation.
We can certainly take a look at it.
Might want to start with Representative Alcero or whoever's office too, to see if they have a summary or something or other that might be.
Okay, okay. Can do that.
They may know, right off the bat. I mean, I don't know.
Right.
I'm unfamiliar with it.
Yeah, I don't know how it aligns or what it would change with the benefits that we offer as a municipality, so I can certainly ask them for that. The other thing I wanted to just build off of what Selectman Glaive had said was to thank everyone who came out for the rededication ceremony for the Edgar P. Romley Veterans Corner. It was quite the turnout, and I think the veterans were very pleased. I know that we were very pleased. And it was a really strong showing, I think, from the community as a whole. Congresswoman Trahan commented on it, Representative Arcero also commented on it, and as did their aides, that they were really impressed with Littleton. So I wanted to thank everybody for coming out for that event. I also wanted to acknowledge that it's come to our attention that some residents have come forward and said that they had submitted the proper paperwork, that they weren't included on the Veterans Corner. We are looking into that, and the board is also welcoming anybody else who feels that they qualify to be included on the Veterans Corner to come forward and contact us and submit their appropriate paperwork, which is the DD 214 form issued at the time of discharge. And we will definitely review those and look into those and come up with a plan going forward to continue this. I mean, it was a partisan process, but I think what's really come from it that's great is a lot more people have come forward now and said that they want to be acknowledged, they want to be included, which is just wonderful. We have a really strong veteran base here in Littleton, and it makes me proud, and I know it makes the board proud, to see those residents come forward and to want to be acknowledged. So if anyone is out there that has that information that they'd like to share with the board, their DD 214, please feel free to bring it forward to us at your convenience.
Thank you. Jason?
I don't think I have any updates tonight.
I just wanted to congratulate you on that service that you had. It was extremely impressive, and how well run it was, how it took off, the people you had there. It was through your hard work and other hard work that you had that attendance there, so certainly congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, financial investigation update number 5.
Joe, you want me to give the update on this? Is that
Please.
fine? We wanted to let folks know with respect to the financial update, kind of where we've gotten, where we're at a high level. So our goal here is to give you a quick, brief updates regarding the fraudulent credit card transactions and the associated investigation that's transpired throughout this calendar year. Essentially, the town has looked at all options available to it in order to make ourselves as whole as possible from those fraudulent charges. And one of the options that was in front of us was pursuing an insurance payout. Our insurance covers against losses for employee dishonesty, is their phrasing, with an up to 3-year look back. And after we looked at the pros and cons of the various restitution methods, the board decided that was going to be the most productive and most likely to succeed avenue for us to get restitution. And so the board has entered into an agreement, the town has entered into an agreement with our insurance carrier to get as much restitution as we can. And so, have we authorized you to sign that? Is that right? And so, at this point, a lot of work went into doing this and tabulating what those fraudulent charges were, and most importantly, what those provable fraudulent charges were. So this pretty much wraps up the restitution component of those fraudulent charges. And principally, we wanted to let residents know that we're pursuing as much as we can here. And there are still certain avenues that could become open to us, but right now we don't see any other actions going forward. We'd also particularly like to thank Cheryl, Steve, and Ann for the amount of time that you guys put into digging through the financial records and helping us put together the best case possible and maximizing the restitution that we could get. So I know it was a very technically and probably emotionally challenging activity to do, so thank you for that. With that, I think we have a lot else to say unless there are questions or comments from the board.
Anything else from the board?
No.
The only thing that I would add is at the next meeting, we anticipate having a discussion with our external auditor as to an internal control audit and the results of said audit.
We're almost right on time. Brings us to the joint, to the tax classification. Mr. Clerk, would you like to read the long?
Nothing would make me happier. The Board of Selectmen of the Town of Littleton will conduct a public hearing under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 56, on Monday, November 18, 2019, at 7 p.m. in the Selectmen's Meeting Room, 103, Littleton Town Offices, 37 Shattuck Street, Littleton, Mass. 01460, on the issue of allocating the local property tax levy among the 5 property classes: residential, open space, commercial, industrial, personal, for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2020. Information from the Board of Assessors concerning various policy options will be available for public inspection on Monday, November 4, 2019, in the Selectmen's Office, Room 306, Littleton Town Offices, and at the town's website, littletonma.org. In preparation for the November 18, 2019 classification hearing, the Board of Selectmen and Board of Assessors will also conduct a public information session on Monday, November 4th, 2019 at 6:35 p.m. in the Selectmen's Meeting Room, 103, Littleton Town Offices, 37 Shattuck Street, Littleton, Mass. 01460. All interested persons and/or parties wishing to be heard will be afforded an opportunity to be heard at both the November 4th, 2019 public information session and the November 18, 2019 property tax classification hearing. Littleton Board of Selectmen, Joe Knox, Chair.
Second.
Well,
I'm always ready.
I would recommend, though, that you move to open the FY 2020 tax classification hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Then I would recommend that, since you've already read it, that you move to waive the reading of the hearing of the notice for the FY 2020 tax classification.
I would move that we waive the hearing notice, reading the hearing notice.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the town standard has been in terms of these hearings, but I've just kind of outlined a process which you may wish to invoke. The board is welcome to do whatever it feels is appropriate at this point. I would recommend that all the deliberations occur when the hearing is open, and then after you close the hearing, then you make a decision on the various 4 criteria.
It's generally what we've done.
So do we,
Bring forth our people. Bring forth the people.
any comments from the assessors?
I don't have any comments.
And we know Fred doesn't.
My comment is you're on your own.
Yeah, it's our favorite time of the year. That's,
Appreciate the recommendation, Fred.
so, board, what do you want to head with this?
Well, we've
Can you put up the,
probably just should check to see if there's any public comment beyond the assessors too.
Any public comments so far? We'll be open anyway before we go into deliberation.
I don't know, I thought we had a great explanation at our last meeting from Steve and from the assessors on great, presentation of where we're at, the various impacts. I'm generally inclined to look for the option that has the kind of the closest to what we had the previous year, unless that means that we're trending too closely to either of the extremes, and whatever that means, I don't want to disproportionately impact either a residential or a commercial property tax bill, which means we have to, pay some attention to what's happened to the valuation pool. And I'm very open to a number of the options in kind of the middle of the pile here.
can I just throw a question at the assessors? if I may?
Oh, please.
Just where we stand, like when was the last assessment and when are we scheduled for the next assessment, just so folks at home, I know that it's been brought up, just so that folks at home can kind of see where we're coming at this from.
So next year is a certification year. This year was an interim adjustment. And we update the assessments yearly. So the assessments were sent out, I think, 3 weeks ago, and they were certified. So it is something we look at annually.
But perhaps to get to what Kathy had said and what your question, to some part of your question might have been, was now we're doing revaluations every, how many years?
Every 5 years.
5
now.
years, and you were, and with the certification year, that's our revaluation year, correct?
Yep, the certification is next year.
Next year
Yep.
is,
No, it's a little confusing. Next year is the reevaluate or the recertification year, but we're changing the values on an annual basis. So it's not like there's
So
gonna be a
it's-
jump
correct.
over a 3 or a 5 year period. We're attempting to make it, so it should be smooth and painless. So to speak. Well, again, it's how much is spent as opposed to what the value of your house is really that's telling on your tax dollars. So we've been adjusting it annually, so they're not gonna see a huge jump next year, other than what the actual market in that 1 year brings. So,
Point out to the board members that what we had printed does not have the last 2 columns on it from that, so there's actually more information there if you're looking, as I was looking for the dollar value change to residential property and CIP. It's not, it's up there, but it's not on a printed copy.
it was on just, when it was printed in
Oh.
portrait,
Oh, I
it just
see.
didn't come out, I guess.
Right,
Because it is on the electronic.
okay.
So is it the feeling of the board to try to keep it as close as where we were last year?
So this is a good way to look at it and good way for people to kind of understand it. If you look at this, it shows number 3 as the last residential shift. That's where we kind of were at last year with, right? So that's, if we were to do that again, the impact to folks, if you look under the residential, say, dollar change, that financial impact to the average homeowner would be $414. The impact to the average commercial property would be, actually would go down
Down,
$323.
yeah.
$323. So that kind of gives us our baseline. And from there, the
Yeah.
Steve and his team have put together, I'm sure it was with you guys as well, right? So, has put together kind of these sample options. If we didn't, down at number 9, if we did equal dollar, you know, kind of similarly what the impact would be to residential and commercial. Number 9 would be CIP factor of 1.435, which starts slipping us close to that 1.5, which is kind of a slippery slope. But that's somewhere around $274. Equal percentage would be 230 for residential, 460 for commercial. So there's all different factors that have to be considered, and one of the things we as a board want to be cognizant of is that CIP factor, which is in the fourth column, if you count the option number. The CIP factor is we cannot go above 1.5 as a CIP factor, and if we do, then we get on a slippery slope, and we have to justify it and fix it, which that's when we start getting into a pretty significant impact to the residential.
Residential,
Yeah. So, I don't know if that helps people to set the stage or muddies the water a little bit more, but I always like this sheet because it does kind of give you the benchmark. This is where we were last year. If we were to do equal dollar or equal percentage, this is what it would be, and it also gives, kind of different stops along the way. And there's also, we are provided with infinite points
In between.
in between. And we can go anywhere in between as well. So if we decided we wanted to go somewhere at 1.393, we have that in a previous slide. So it's all a matter of whether or not, basically what, we have to make a decision for where that impact lies, so that's some of the discussion that we have to have, barring any input from the public, I think.
It's somewhat arbitrary, but in my mind, I certainly don't want to go down to get close to that 1.5 range. You need to have flexibility, because if something should change dramatically in the evaluation class in an upcoming year, you want to be able to offset it somewhat if you can. If you're at the end of the rope, you can't, then you're kind of stuck. At the same time, the arbitrary part I'm noting in my mind is I would be disinclined to support a factor that actually ended up having a reduction in any class, which of course in this, it really only applies to commercial, at the expense of the residential. Some of the first thing that jumps out at me is option C, which is number 7 there, where it's, it is more for the residential. I think if we just follow the same percentage, what was that, the 270? Where was it? Trying to look at the last residential show. Okay, yeah, the 414 to 321. So it's a savings from that perspective, and there's a modest increase in the commercial end, but we can't really can't go much farther in that direction. It's the residential values are so high coming in. It's
takes
really
up a big
driving
piece of that
everything.
pie,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's what.
I really agree with you with what you just said, because we can't go any higher than that. We could put ourselves in a bind in the years to come too, and you have an increase for both, without a tremendous increase for both.
That's just looking at this kind of in a vacuum by myself. This is kind of where I was settling, is somewhere in that range, and that's, where I was looking.
Plus the-
Like to minimize, go ahead.
Just to reiterate what you said earlier, we're not bound to any of these options. We can pick,
Somewhere
something
in
get real
between, yeah.
creative there, pick your favorite numbers,
I mean, to be perfectly honest, that's sort of where I landed, somewhere between option C and option B. Option C being
Right.
the first point at which there isn't a decreased rate for someone.
Right.
And option B being the top end of what I think could be reasonable, and somewhere within that, whether if we just want to, for the sake of a round number, if we want 1.42,
Get your calculator working?
Okay, I got the 1.42 right in front of me here, so.
the effects are pretty knowable based on that too.
So 1.42, just to use that number since you threw it out, Chase, if these are the board. 1.42 would be, change in residential would be 315.
Yep.
Change in CIP, I touched it and it went away. Come on,
104.62.
thank you. So 315 and 104.62. So it's a little bit, give it a little bit on either side, right?
Oh,
But that does inch us by a hair higher towards that 1.5 by 2/100ths, right?
right.
Or 2000s, sorry.
Still, again, if you repeat, if you've got them there, not to dumb it down, but for what people look at the end of the day, their actual tax bill, maybe you can repeat, Chuck, what that represents in terms of a residential change and a CIP change in their actual bills on the average.
1.2?
Yeah,
Yeah, so 1.42 in the CIP factor would be a $315.95% change in the residential bill. It'd be $104.82 change,
you say 395?
315,
315.
315, I'm sorry, 315 and, yeah.
and 104.82. So that's at 1.42 flat, whereas this is 1.4182 or something, right?
Right.
So there is some forgiveness for residential, a little more, just a little more, it was up by $26 for commercial.
And not that it's a lot, but
Down
we still
$6
have
for
8 basis points or whatever to the max.
Yeah, I'd probably put for some input from them.
One other thing perhaps to consider is, as you deliberate this and you're sort of inching a little closer to that 1.5 mark, is next year's estimated growth is almost predominantly residential growth. Would you agree with that, Kathy?
Absolutely.
So it's going to skew you more, and to maintain sort of the level you're at and the balance you're attempting to achieve here is going to push you even higher towards that 1.5 mark.
So
2 years out, there's estimated commercial growth of what, the hotel and some other things, but I look at it with one, right, am I correct about
Yeah,
that?
that's good.
Is you're more likely to get residential projects to come online in a much quicker time frame. So our residential estimates may be off in terms of somebody comes up with a 20-unit project, something like that, and you know what can happen to a commercial project. Look at, what is it, the Spotted Salamander, or whatever we have down by Foster Street, right, where we're gonna put a hotel in there. There's something that was gonna go in by the train station, and we were supposed, the guy had to build little tunnels underneath Foster Street, so that project went. So just on the chance that you're not gonna get that same commercial growth, you're gonna be pushed even higher. So you might wanna consider raising the residential.
to your earlier point, if we save them $50 this year, it's gonna cost them that much more next year.
Yeah,
So if we-
you're gonna
if we
feel more of
flatten it out now,
an
we go up to,
impact.
option C or something above option C.
You won't have the room on that longer
Right.
end, and any growth in the residential piece of that pie will be borne totally by the residents.
Right.
I think that's part of, when we throw around 1.42, I think that's exactly what we're doing, where it's, I understand we're shifting it upwards somewhat still, but the net impact to the average resident versus the net impact to the average commercial property is still significantly different, right? If we were truly interested in putting blinders on and making this as painless as possible for those that vote, we could very easily walk into a very bad situation.
We have in the past.
Right, and I think the information we're getting, prudent information, is we might be boxing ourselves a little bit more into that corner next year if we go too far this year. Which puts me back at option C again, just to, I kind of hate to be below it's more politics than math, but I'd hate to go out to the residents and say, your bill's going up, but the commercial property's going down, which is reality under a lot of those scenarios. It actually has been, over the past several years too, and some, and when actual bills come out, but.
And that's why I think option C is the lowest CIP that I would support. But I would support option C.
I think based upon the input from basically the subject matter experts, I think that's, unless,
Well, let's play the game in the other direction too. What would 1.41 without the 8 do? What would that look like?
1.41.
Or 1.4, anything that gets the CIP above a negative dollar change.
So the point at which the commercial pays.
Yeah.
Gets raised is 1.415.
Okay.
I think. Yeah, it's $49.15. Residential would be $329.91.
That just
That
feels,
doesn't quite seem right.
no, I think, yeah, it's, would be disproportionate.
1.415, and I know it drives you guys nuts when we talk about the average impact, but it's the cleanest way for us to understand it, I apologize.
320, was it 329 in?
329.91.
And $49.50.
And 49.15.
Is 1.415.
Yep.
Versus 4.182, which is 321.88. So basically,
But it's a direction we might want to take
If it's gonna be,
next year.
yeah. We're looking at, almost exclusively residential growth next year. We're gonna need the
and
capacity.
If we're being honest, there's no guarantees we're getting a hotel in 2 years either.
No, I mean, all of
So
this is.
the residential
yeah.
could still be heavy in 2 years. So, we're dealing on speculation.
Yep. Nature of the game.
Sure is. I'm comfortable, whatever the pleasure of
So
the board
back
is.
to
I
option C.
think that
So do we want to close the hearing? And
deliberate.
Okay, yeah,
any further comments from the public?
I'll make a motion that we,
Council would recommend your deliberation occur inside the hearing, generally speaking.
that hasn't been the case before.
I spoke with council the other day on the subject of another hearing that we have today, and he suggested that all the deliberation occur inside the hearing, and then the actual motion be taken outside the hearing.
I don't
He's
know.
been in the room. We've talked
Yeah,
about
about 100 times in the past 20 years that he's been here when we've done it otherwise, but.
I don't know as though it's as critically important for this type of thing or the other hearing we have on tonight's agenda, so if the board wants to seek more advice on something like that, we can certainly do
Yeah,
that.
well, definitely, because I don't think I've ever done it that way in 20 years.
Perhaps I misunderstood council.
Well, in any case, I think it's a moot point for
Yeah,
this
yeah.
particular.
Right.
Right.
So someone want to make a motion then not to go out, just to,
Close the hearing? How about the motion to close the hearing?
Second.
motion made and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
All right, so somewhere between 1.415 and, thanks a lot, Nina.
I would go with the 1.415, give us a little leeway next year.
So what's the delta in, did you jot down the, so option C is 321, what was that,
329 and 91. Delta is $8.91.
Here's my only concern about that.
Roughly.
It gets awfully close to essentially no impact to on the commercial rate. The 88,
$50.
the average, right, the average effect on the commercial rate, I can round 88 up to 100 and go, okay, well, that makes sense. I look at $40 and I don't see that. And this is a purely perception issue. In terms of real dollars, I'm not sure it matters at the end of the day.
So, last year, we were at 138, 231. And if we were to do the same thing this year, it's a $400. I'm trying to, speak of the devil. I'm just trying to project out what, if we did 141, 82, 842, or 1.415, we're using kind of the same math, where we'd end up next year.
I mean, that's a delta of about 0.035. So if we went up that same jump again next year, we'd be at 1.5, 1.45, sorry.
4 or 5, yeah. So it'd be like equal percentage, we're equal percentages this year. And would go up another point.
But that's essentially, that statement is true whether you go with 1.418 or 1.415.
Absolutely, we're talking thousands again, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I understand your argument just relative to perception, $88 versus 49. A $9 delta in the residential is not terribly impactful, but for anyone that does actually take a look at what the impact was for commercial, frankly, people don't pay attention to this, they pay attention to what the rate per thousand is, which isn't necessarily the right way to look at it, but, and that's, the change in those is inconsequential, it's pennies.
I go either way.
Yeah,
The
me
rest you
too.
feel.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about $50 for a
Right.
commercial property and $8 for an average residential.
Right.
there. And frankly, no additional amount of flexibility in the long run in this if we're looking at
That would be my only reason for leaning more towards the
4.18 or 1.415. Those are the same numbers.
So what are your thoughts, Chuck? What were you just saying?
I'm just gonna say that I would lean, again, won't die on the hill for anything, but the 1.415 just gives us that little extra element of flexibility moving forward in the next couple of years with no real commercial growth slated.
So make a motion, I'll support it.
Okay.
And it's not my favorite, but I can live with it.
Move the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 56, relative to the FY 2020 property tax to establish a residential factor of 4 point,
Nope.
0.88268.
can we do that, Fred?
0.88268.
0.88268. Is that right?
Yes, that corresponds to the 1.45 that the board has been discussing.
1.415.
Sorry,
is
that's
the-
what I
the
meant.
CIP factor,
Yes.
so yeah, 0.88268. Is there anything else I need to read?
You can go through the next two if the board wishes to include the next two, whether to adopt or not to adopt, but I understand we have to wait on the last one.
We haven't deliberated any of those others.
Okay?
So I think-
I'll second that motion as it stands.
I'm going to do the other two also?
We'll go into them after we take this vote, I
Okay.
think, yeah.
Motion's been made and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
All right, so residential exemption,
It's my understanding that the board, the town has never adopted either of the next two. And in the case of the first one, there are only 14 communities, according to the assessor's memorandum, as the board knows, that have adopted the residential exemption.
I don't remember the past since we haven't done them, that we even had a motion on it. I mean, I don't think we need to take a motion not to
My
adopt it if we're
understanding
not
is you
adopting.
do need to
I think we have.
vote them.
Have we?
Yeah,
Yeah, do we?
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But your recommendation is not to, since,
Yeah, it's more for, you're taking your second homes and your apartment buildings, and it's a shift, so everybody whose house is their residence would be getting an exemption, but we don't have enough vacation homes to really shift that burden, so it would be like a reshift when we already shift, so. It's more for communities to have large second homes and large apartments and vacation apartment buildings, so we just really don't have that here to make any sense of it.
town council has a bunch of those vacation homes. So I'll make, so the whole, well, before I make the motion with the not to adopt the residential exemption, I'm assuming we're gonna go the same route for this,
Yes.
for the
Correct.
business exemption.
Yeah.
Is there any funds in unused property tax levy?
My understanding is this number gets calculated based on the first motion that was taken.
Because you went off script, Cheryl has to go calculate what that number is, should be back.
So we have to wait on that one.
Yes, but we can continue to do the next two and then
Two and come
come
back.
back, yeah.
Move the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 56, relative to the FY 2020 property tax, not to adopt residential exemption and not to adopt a small business exemption.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Just moving the other one. Okay, moving on.
No, I hate to break this to you, but I think we're.
If I could just make one last comment, because this seems to come up almost every year, is that the vote you made will result in a lower tax rate. But that doesn't mean it's lower taxes.
Right.
Because the headline tends to be that you lowered the tax rate, and then I get asked why the taxes went up. So I just thought I would sort of clarify
We
that
wouldn't
now.
do anything to propagate a rumor like that.
So, well, it's 20 years of it happening. I'm kind of just taking a guess that might happen again, so.
It left here clean, what the assessors did with it, I don't know.
Yeah, we voted a reduction in the rate. Talk to Fred, this is his number.
Yeah, drop by.
But for me, as far as real estate goes, people look at that tax rate, oh, it went down, you know?
Sorry about that. That's-
Okay, we also have to move on?
Yeah, we can, yeah, because we closed the hearing, so it's just better of us coming back to that vote, right?
Yep. Now we have a joint meeting with the Housing Authority for an appointment. Come on.
I saw you before.
Already? I'd like to introduce you to Sonia, our newest member of the Housing Authority. Sonia is not new to Littleton by any matter of name. She's been here about 23 years. She lived in our family housing with 4 children who went to school here in Littleton. And since then, she has moved into the elderly side of the housing. And she was voted in by the elderly people overwhelmingly to be on the board. And so she's quite popular and quite knowledgeable of elderly housing and housing in general. And would like to, very much like to have her on our board. She's already been sworn in, believe it or not, but we're just introducing her now. I know, we do things a little different sometimes. Yeah,
You can't have got sworn in before, though, right? This is just a re-up?
yeah, she had to reapply. Yeah.
Well, yes and no.
Yeah.
I'm finishing out
Yeah, go
a
ahead.
term
Okay.
from the previous, and then you'll see me again. Yeah.
We didn't
Well,
understand
many
at the
times,
town of, when we had elections, that actually her name does not go on the ballot, the town ballot. It is brought up to the housing first. And she's voted, and that's why we had to
By the
wait for the
residents.
voting for the housing. So that's why she's here tonight, and I'm here. I don't see anyone else, but
Marcy's here.
there he is. I was hoping he was here. And
Should have come up.
I'm too shy to come up with.
Wallflower back there.
thanks, Harvey.
Any questions by the board at all?
No, happy to
Thank you.
have you still there.
We're happy to have her.
Motion then?
Move that the Board of Selectmen and the remaining members of the Littleton Housing Authority vote pursuant to MGL Chapter 41, Section 11, and Chapter 121B, subsection 5 and 5A, to appoint Littleton Housing Authority tenant Ms. Sonia Lodge to fill a vacancy on the Housing Authority Board for a term expiring May 9, 2020.
Second.
Motion was made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sonia.
Thanks.
Okay, number 8. Host community agreement, our next steps. Read this in the scene.
Certainly. So the board has received some information from council's office, and town council attorney Chris Heap is here this evening representing our town council's office on the subject of HCA negotiations. The board was looking for, at the last time that the board discussed this, I'm sure the board remembers, but for the purposes of the audience and those at home, the board took council up on its offer to receive information and examples and guidance from council relative to other host community agreements. So council has written a attorney-client privilege memo, which was distributed to the board outside of the packet, because again, of course, it's under attorney-client privilege. And the options that are presented on the screen here relate to the options that the board has relative to how you might structure next steps in terms of negotiations themselves. I guess I would leave it there and see if Chris has any further comments.
Sure. I think that explains sort of most of what we've provided to the board thus far. Just procedurally, we were, I think, asked to think about the various approaches that the board might take in terms of actually negotiating these HCAs with the applicants that you've identified. And broadly speaking, the boards can do that in any number of ways, but the three that seemed most commonly done to in our experience are what we're seeing are that some towns are just adopting a blanket, a general form HCA, without working with the applicants, just saying, when they have applicants come in, here's the HCA that we'd like you to sign. These are the terms that we've decided need to be put in place. There it is. If that doesn't leave room for much flexibility in terms of what the board might actually work out with the individual applicants at the individual locations that they've selected. So the two other approaches that we called out are designating one from among your number to go off and attempt to negotiate this HCA with the applicants and bring it back to the full board for review and approval. And the third is to designate or create some sort of subcommittee of the board with more than one member that would go off and do that. We would expect to be involved with this in terms of the drafting and helping you guys put the agreement together. But in terms of, those are sort of the options that we've identified in terms of how the board might be involved in those negotiations.
Joe, do you mind if I ask a couple questions?
Please.
In terms of, lots of communities are getting their bells rung right now over host community agreements. Legislature may or may not act, who knows? What is council's opinion on agreements to do things within the HCA that are non-financial? Are those within the bounds? Let's say, let me give you a not completely hypothetical scenario. The applicant, we've had an applicant who has agreed to do a certain amount of community service hours, right? In one construct, there's a certain amount of dollars associated with that. But at the same time, we're not demanding payment from them, yet in lots of public sessions, they've committed to doing something like that. Would memorializing something like that in the host community agreement be legal? Whether it's a good idea or not, first, would it be legal? And second of all, would memorializing something like that in a second non-binding document like a memorandum of understanding be a viable path, recognizing that we wouldn't be able to force them to do what's in the MOU, but we could hold it up in public and hit them over the head with it.
Well, I think, so.
There are a lot of questions embedded in this, so I apologize.
No, that's fine. What the statute says with respect to payments, and as I think all of you know by now, is that you cannot, the maximum amount that the town can collect as an impact fee is 3% of gross sales from a retail establishment. I think commitments to do other things that are non-financial, I wouldn't be too terribly worried about those things in being included in the HCA. It's primarily what I think is seeming to be tricky in other, or could turn out to be tricky in other communities. Nobody's actually had their HCA blown up yet.
And we would prefer to not be at that
No,
stage.
we don't want to be the first one to have that happen. So, and there's also, just in terms of factual background, there is a concern that the legislature might do something about becoming increasingly involved in HCA's. In addition to that, I don't know if the board's aware of this, many towns in Massachusetts that have entered into HCA's with marijuana establishments have recently been served with subpoenas by the U.S. Attorney's Office asking for information about the HCA negotiations. I believe those have gone to every community in Massachusetts that has an HCA with a retailer. Those have not thus far gone to cultivators or labs or the other kinds of marijuana establishments that exist. And the difficulty there is that those are just subpoenas so far, that nobody's actually, nothing's come of them yet, but that does go, it's an example of an increasing sort of level of oversight, at least, of these after they've been executed by the town and the marijuana establishment in various communities. But to answer your question, I think we'd want to be careful as we're negotiating.
Sure.
To parse each and every thing that is either being asked for by the town or that the applicant is offering to the town, and try to determine whether it is appropriate or not. But I would tend to think of things like community service and activities being run by an applicant, or like, they might go provide some sort of community education or a seminar of some kind. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. Going out and doing stuff, activities like that, I don't think would run afoul of the prohibition that we can't go above 3.
Okay. The reason I ask that is that that's significant, in my opinion, about whether we should do essentially just a fill in the blank, option 1 HCA, everybody gets the exact same terms, or a more specifically tailored HCA for each applicant, because if we couldn't incorporate things like the community service agreements that's some have put forward, right? I hate to go back to the community and say, oh, well, we said we'd enter into HCA negotiations with these folks, but we actually have no way of making sure that they follow through on the commitments that they've made. And so I'm interested anyway in seeing some of those memorialized in some way, whether that's the HCA, or I would also be comfortable with it, like an MOU, understanding that an MOU wouldn't be legally binding, but it would have a certain amount of political power. Say, hey, wait, you said you were gonna do these, 100 community service hours. Show us how you did those things. And the applicant until their license needs to be renewed, could very well tell us, hey, I'm not doing them. I would hope that our licensees are smart enough to realize that would be.
An MOU outside of the HCA, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm okay with either one of those, but if we can incorporate them into the HCA, I would certainly be most interested in doing that first and foremost. Within reason. And I also don't want these to become Rube Goldberg machines that.
That's a good point. And I think another point that argues in favor of option 2 or 3 is that there may be things that are specific to a given site, one site and not others, that you wouldn't capture in that first option. Like, for example, if traffic's going to be, if there are concerns about traffic, you might that's probably gonna be something that's later on addressed by the planning board in the special permitting process, but there may be things that we could figure out to include in the HCA that go to those kinds of things, where you might need to worry about them with one location and not another.
Would it be appropriate or acceptable, let's take another concern that we've had, fencing, right? Typically, I would say we would want to rely on the planning board to do that, but I would also want to memorialize something in the HCA, given that they haven't yet gotten to the planning board, and I don't know if those guys can sometimes. You know, the applicant agrees to put up fencing or some other thing approved by the, comparable thing approved by the planning board. In other words, I don't want to box the planning board in, but I also want to make sure that we've recognized the very solvable concerns that have been brought forward to us without just letting them fritter away, you know?
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate. You'd want to leave some room for the planning board to probably fine tune it.
Sure.
But if there were, you know, a location that looked otherwise appropriate, but the board were concerned that there's neighbors on one side that are gonna see the traffic and, you know, people walking in and out, it would, I think, be fine for the board to say in the HCA, you need to screen that somehow, you just need to do it later on with the satisfaction of the planning board. With, and if there were other parameters you wanted to include, you could do that too.
So would this board suggest that one person have a subcommittee do this?
So when we talked about cultivation, we had two of us, was Melissa and I.
I'd much rather have more than one person
Yeah.
be part of this.
Yeah, I agree. So when we met with, it was Keith, myself, Melissa, and Maren, that met with, actually, as far as the HCA negotiations, I believe it was just Melissa and myself. Keith was in the room. And we brought it back to the full board, and then we deliberated.
So you want to bring those two back?
If Melissa's open to doing it, I think that'd be great. An
What
appointee.
what if instead of creating a subcommittee, we authorize one member, a subcommittee becomes,
Open
yeah, now all the meetings need to be posted, minutes, so on and so forth, whereas council put forward, one member of the board is responsible for conducting the negotiations, and then another board member could participate in the discussions, provided the board member delegated to negotiate the HCA requests the additional input at his or her discretion, and is not directed to do so by the whole board. So essentially, we would appoint one person and understand that one person we're appointing is going to be expected to incorporate another member in the discussion. Is that, am I getting a little
I would,
too cagey there?
I think you were, I'd worry a little bit about that being the effectively the same thing as creating a subcommittee. I think if the goal is to fully delegate it to one of you, and that person later on wanted to, as we said in the letter, bring in someone to help every now and then for a little bit of input, that would be okay. But I would want it is at this point, in terms of how we're gonna delegate it, a fairly stark choice between fully deputizing one of you or making it more than one, which would be a subcommittee.
So we did not form a subcommittee. It was Melissa and I, so were we outside of the bounds there by doing that? Because we were charged by the Board of Selectmen with.
No,
negotiating
that's
HCA.
perfect, no, I should have explained more fully. That is perfectly appropriate for the board to have done when you did it with the medical establishment. The only consequence of doing it as a board is that you trigger the open meeting law, and everything needs to be posted and open. And,
Two, not.
two, yeah.
Two members have to.
If the board is forming a committee of itself to go off and do the board's work, then yes, you would be subject to
Even if there's only two?
Chris, could we hybridize this a little bit and do it in these steps. Essentially, create, almost, most of the HCA, most of every HCA we enter into is still going to be wrote.
That's true.
Can we sort of work on that track with, some additional leeway for site-specific information? In other words, we develop the general form, and then whoever's negotiating it is really only negotiating within these minor bounds, right? For example, we all agree that the retail establishments should be contributing 3%, full stop. Anything that anyone negotiates, like if we send the negotiator out and they negotiate 1%, that's dead on arrival, right? So if we agree on what the broad terms are, and then the site-specific considerations are left up to the negotiator, then the board has had input on the big stuff, and then the site-specific stuff should be fairly straightforward to sort of address on a site-specific basis. That would, I think, streamline any negotiations we have with whoever, right? Other labs, processing facilities, so on. We say, here's the HCA in general. We're gonna fill in this blank section depending on where you go. That gives a certain amount of regulatory certainty for whoever's coming forward. They know what to expect. But we still maintain flexibility to do it on a applicant by applicant basis with minor adjustments based on location. I just don't want to
like
get
that idea.
in the cycle of writing each of these things
Right.
from a blank piece of paper.
And in that scenario, the first step, if I'm hearing you correctly, would be to develop a template. And then the next step would be to either designate individuals and negotiate, individuals and negotiate.
That's exactly right. And in the process of determining that template, we would determine as a board what is within the bounds, within the purview of the negotiator, right? So the 3%, I think there may not be a lot to talk about other than that, but that 3%, for example, that's already done. We know what it is, so that if we don't have a subcommittee doing this, then it's at least constrained.
So do we
I
have?
like that approach.
You like that approach, having one person do it? I don't. I think we should, if it means we have to take minutes and post and all that kind of stuff, I think that we should do it, albeit in executive session because it's a negotiation.
No, that's an open meeting.
There's no exemption that applies. So there's another,
You're not, I'd have to sort of walk through all the various exemptions, but that's a negotiation with, it is not necessarily open to do an executive session merely because it's a negotiation with an outside party. If you were negotiating, you're not negotiating to purchase their real estate, you're not,
employment contract.
yeah, no, so that's it could happen,
So it's a business contract, and if we've got 3 potential host community agreement negotiations pending. And the text of one could impact the text of another, so if it's an open meeting, then
everybody's privy to what's in the other one. Which, I mean,
Yeah, I agree.
This is when the state government
Yep.
gets a little too cute by a half and ties our hands by not allowing 2 of us to negotiate. I mean, Chris, let's be frank. 2 of us negotiated the host community agreement with Sanctuary.
And I thought that worked.
We didn't post, we had meetings.
The
Guilty as charged.
No, well, that was also a number of years ago, and I'd say that the guidance that we see from the Attorney General's office has become increasingly clear over the years as to what the subcommittee issue of boards of selectmen has become sort of an increasingly hot topic over the past couple of years. So it's entirely.
They need to focus on the stuff that's gonna help the citizens of the Commonwealth instead of focus on nonsense about minutia. It's aggravating as hell. We can't get crap done.
One hybrid, perhaps, I realize the open meeting law can be a point of frustration. It certainly is for me as well. One hybrid might be if the board was interested in moving down the road that Chase had suggested, then perhaps coming up with that template and then deciding the future steps between option 2 and 3, depending upon how the template was coming. Perhaps it would be easier to make the decision of 2 less ideal options at that point. Less than ideal options at that point.
And we could also have the 3 parties submit a proposed host community agreement, and we can negotiate off of that. They can propose that to the whole board, and we could deliberate it and negotiate off of that. Right? Is that another option?
That is another option.
It's incumbent upon the parties to come to us with some agreement.
I never start a contract, I never let someone else write a contract if I can write it first.
We can rewrite it. I mean, I'm just trying to find, there's only so much bandwidth, right?
Yep.
So, but on the other side of that, there's been a lot of these that have been negotiated, so there's plenty of.
That's why I don't,
We can plagiarize.
I don't see the first part, especially the formulaic part. I would think in 2 weeks, we could have that done based on halfway decent. If Chris
you guys
doesn't
want-
already have one, I would be
If you,
surprised.
no, we do, and if you guys wanted all the boilerplate, what we would consider boilerplate from town council's office, for your meeting in 2 weeks, we can do that. With, blanks left in where we're gonna include the
We're going to charge one
important
person to go out and negotiate.
financial and.
I would prefer to have the 2-person model, which, I bet we could probably do and not suffer any consequences when open meeting law is cited. What we're really talking about are interpretations of it. Even the AG only gives interpretations of it, right? Courts give the ruling on it. But if we have to have one, and you seem to be engaged, yeah, I'd be happy to have Chuck act as a individual and keep us updated and go do the next steps. Well, I mean, just, if we're being hemmed in here, we gotta go with one, and fine, let's do it and get to the next part. If it's something the board's not comfortable with, well, we can deliberate it as a board.
But do we want a template first that he can go by and?
Well, I'd like to, whoever it is, charge them to, give them as least amount of fetters as possible and let them come back with something.
So if it were me or any one of us, Chris could still present that template as a starting point for our negotiator to have a starting point. I just think that we need to get moving. We gotta do something. I mean, this is.
I agree, and that's part of why I don't care about the, frankly, I don't care about our applicants, the confidentiality of their HCA negotiations with us. I care about the confidentiality of their business plans and all that stuff. But this is something that should be negotiated in pretty short order. I don't see any competitive advantage that one gets over the other by knowing what's happening, even if they felt like filing all the open records requests possible. My principal concern with having one person was expediency. Two's fine, but I'm with you, Chuck. Let's
Do
choose a
something.
path
Do something.
and let's go down it.
I'm comfortable with any one of the 4, although I nominate Chuck, and I'm sure whoever it is will keep us all informed, and we'll do fine.
All right, so just to clarify though, so we're going to receive a blank template from town council that we're gonna work off of through these negotiations, like a form.
Well, I guess I'd ask the question whether the whole board
Wants to see the template.
needs to see the boilerplate stuff while what I would think of as the more important site-specific negotiations are happening on a sort of interim basis, or whether it would be better for the whole board to see a full, clean, ready to fully review draft HCA, at the end. I'm not it's not clear to me, although I'll defer to the board, whether that interim step in front of the whole board is a useful exercise. I think it would be better for the board to review the whole thing at the same time.
Okay.
That includes all the terms.
To charge the negotiator to go forward with that document.
You know,
That we
the way
agree
this would
on
work is,
in advance.
instead of being back in 2 weeks to walk you through the stuff that's gonna go in every HCA, we're back in a month, and Chuck saying, here's what we've negotiated. This is, I think, the best we can do. It passes muster with town council, and then we open it up for the full board discussion. And at that point, you know, the whole board has the opportunity to review and comment. And, you know, in theory approves it, but if there's provisions that the board doesn't like or wants to see further explored, you know, that's when the whole board gets to look at it.
I like that because it also allows us to then look at the full thing and say, you know what, going forward, paragraphs 1, 2, 7, 12, and 15, those are standard. We've decided.
Non-negotiable.
That's it, non-negotiable. And then on the back end of this, we can give that back to council and say, hey, make sure Nina has it. If anybody wants to do something different or wants to negotiate an HCA with us or comes in inquiring about our ability or willingness to do this, you can hand that to them and say, this is where you'll start. But that also doesn't hold us up in this process. So that really means that we're at either option 2 or option 3, a single individual or a subcommittee.
Would say it.
What do you,
Oh, I was all for doing one. But I'm, you know, happy to hear what others have to say. But if you want a motion, that's like a motion.
The only upside to 2 is that that's 2 of us sharing the load.
3, you mean? Upside.
I'm sorry, the only upside to
individuals.
option 3 is that is 2 of us, 2 individuals.
right, right.
From a bandwidth standpoint, but not necessarily from a scheduling standpoint, because now you have 2 scheduled calendars.
I don't care. Chuck, if you want to run option 2, I'd be 100% for it.
I'll
But it's also asking a lot, so.
do whatever we need to do. I just think we need to get moving.
So make a motion then.
All right, I'll move the board vote to authorize Selectman Chuck DeCoste to negotiate the HCA with blah, blah, all the 3. Should we do it individually, name them as they're listed there? Yeah, I guess so. Community Care Collective, Littleton Apothecary, and/or G7 Laboratories, and bring a final draft of the HCA to the full board for its review and approval.
Second.
Sorry.
Motion been made and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Good.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chuck.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Item number 9, earth removal, a hearing, 64 Spectacle Pond Road. Mr. Dean?
I would, just for formality purposes, I would recommend that the board open the hearing for the soil removal. I would recommend the board move to open the soil removal hearing relating to 64 Spectacle Pond Road.
I move to open the soil removal hearing related to 64 Spectacle Pond.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to open the hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Would the board like me to go through just generally what's in the packet and some of the potential points that I see, or would you just like to go down this road in the way, Joe, Mr. Chairman, you'd like to go down? Is there any benefit to me summarizing any information, is the question.
If you want to take the lead, okay, go ahead.
I'm happy not to, but I was just wanted to
No,
say.
I'm fully aware to start the whole thing. if you-
Okay, very good. It's all yours.
Mr. Dean? Green. Yes. Sorry.
This is Sean Green, Cheryl Gould for Sean Green, and this is Steve Breitmeyer, whom you may all know as a contractor locally.
Checking out your audience.
Yeah, I was just seeing who else was here that I needed to introduce, but you know everybody in the room.
Let me start by saying that this was brought to my attention. A lot of things were brought to the board sometimes when we go out on our own and see what's going on. When I went out there, I think it's easy to say I was a little bit shocked by what I saw with the amount of work that was done. I know that in the past, we've had a similar situation that happened on Hartwell Avenue, where there was a resident who was taking soil out of his backyard, and that person went through the whole process of coming before this board, engineered plans, borings, a plan on how it was going to be taken out, the whole thing, all the way down to a bond at the end, how it was going to look when it was all done, made sure that runoff and everything else wasn't affecting anybody. I went out and saw, and have seen pictures of what the hill that was there, and once again, I made the board aware of this situation, and personally, I thought it was kind of shocking that someone wouldn't come forward to ask this board like the other person had. And I wish I had known about this earlier. And my real concerns in the future is what's going to happen. Is what's soil water runoff going to be, that type of thing. And Nina, if you want to add on.
Yeah, I think based on the concerns we've heard from, an abutter, there's concern about whether this will impact their property negatively, and I think that the board, based on my individual conversations with you, probably part of the reason we have these earth removal regulations. I'm sure there are other aspects of it which perhaps will come out today in discussion, but these have been longstanding bylaws and regulations that if I might go out on a limb and saying, we're probably trying to have a resolution come forward that is reasonable for resolving the potential concerns that may have been created. But that's me speculating what the board may think. That's the board's position to take.
I certainly want to allow Mr. Green to make comment. Anyone from the board want to make a comment first before I let him speak?
I'm just assuming at some point we're going to open it up for public input as well
Yes,
as
well, that's certainly going to happen.
building department's input as well.
So would you like to give us a background of?
I just wanted to pass these along, just a little briefing of photos of what everything looked like prior as well, along with the Dig Safe application as well that was applied for.
So go through the history.
So initially, I had hired my contractor, Steve Bright, to relocate and reposition a shed that was in my yard. And he then in turn, I asked him to find out what type of permitting was necessary for it. He had met with Roland Bernier approximately a week before he retired and explained to him that we were looking to reposition a 16 by 17 foot shed. And Roland then in turn stated, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, that by obtaining a building permit for here, that would be adequate for the soil to be removed as well, because it was in conjunction of placing the unit on the opposite side of the hill. Am I correct, Steve?
Yeah, he basically said, because we were doing landscaping and making the yard better so that he could put the shed there, that all we had to do was get the permit for the shed. That's why we went to see him, to see if we had to get any special permit, but he said that was all we needed.
So if I could input, I think at the time, everyone understood that it was just a landscaping job and that the soil wasn't going to be removed off-site. And I think since then, and since the soil was removed off-site, they've been made aware of the earth removal permit and the necessity of an earth removal permit. So Mr. Green has since and recently filed for that permit. He's here before you to correct and not throw blame anywhere who said what, when, but rather to make it right now, to look at what all the things that the board is concerned about, how much earth was removed, what fees were due to the town, what safeguards are in place to make sure that none of the concerns that you raised, Joe, would be a problem.
I guess the problem that I have is that, and I wasn't there, I don't know what Roland said. I've worked with Roland for 30 years. And I was on the board in the 80s when I put him on, so I have a lot of faith in everything he had done. But I can't imagine him saying, it's okay to take 1,500 cubic yards out of your backyard to move a shed. just can't imagine that being said, because earth removal comes before this board, it doesn't become before the building inspector. So I mean,
It's why I went to see Roland, because isn't he the zoning officer?
it's
Yes, but
correct.
this is not a provision under zoning.
Oh, well, anyways, I went to see him, and he said it sounded like we were all right to do that, so I went ahead and dug it out for him.
Mr. Chairman, I did have a conversation with the former building commissioner, and while I don't want to misstate what he said to me today, his recollection of the conversation, and by no means am I questioning your statements when I say this, I just want to provide input to the process the best I can. He doesn't necessarily recall an address being presented. Again, I wasn't present, I'm just restating what I understood Mr. Bernier to have said to me. Again, I can't stress enough that I'm not questioning your comments or otherwise. I'm just trying to share with the board that I did have a conversation with Mr. Bernier about the general discussion. And, I mean, I understand that this was very close to Mr. Bernier's retirement, so, and last day at work. This was also several months ago. I don't think that there are any extemporaneous memorandums on the subject matter, so we don't have a great deal of written information.
You don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask Ms. Cobley, were you present, Michelle, for any of this?
I was not present for the conversation that.
Or any follow-up conversations prior to the work? Maybe you want to identify yourself for the record. I apologize for not doing that.
Michelle Cobley, Assistant Zoning Officer, and I also work for the building department. I was not present for the conversation that Mr. Breitmeyer and Mr. Bernier had. Mr. Green had come in the office at one point asking to talk to Roland about whether an earth removal permit was needed. And I told him that earth removal went through the Selectmen's office and directed him to go over there to get the application to see if it applied to what his project was going to be. At that time, there was no discussion about a shed or anything. He said he wanted to take down part of a hill in his yard and regrade his yard a little bit. And I said, well, if it's grading that you're doing, that's more landscaping, but if it's earth removal, then you have to go through the earth removal process. There was a building permit pulled for a shed, which I did not see when this issue first came up a few weeks ago. But what I question as to whether this falls into this all going under a building permit is the permit was pulled by Mr. Green, not by Mr. Breitmeyer, and it said to just install a 16 by 17 storage shed, and they listed the project cost at $2,000. So clearly, the amount of work that was done out there was in excess of $2,000. So I wouldn't say that this building permit covered what they're trying to say fell under that scope of that project.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So my understanding is that building permits allow incidental. Incidental, is that the right?
Yes.
Can you characterize what you understand that to mean?
So that's what's vague in the bylaw because there's really no definition of incidental. So if you were asking my opinion, it's during the construction of a new home where you're digging out for a foundation and you're doing grading, and the plan that's submitted with the building permit would show the finished grading around the foundation when it's done. And of course, when it's done, there may be some extra material that is not any longer needed on the site. To me, that would be incidental and in connection with the construction of the building.
May I just interrupt for one moment? Sure. So there was no trucking costs at all involved here? We didn't pay for any trucking costs. It was in exchange for the material? So there was no cost, it was only for Steve's time. That was it, and it was $2,500 that I did pay for Steve.
I guess it's not the cost of more, but it's-
Mr. Chair, if I may.
please.
So I guess what the issue is, under the soil removal, chapter 147, the exception to having to obtain a permit under our bylaws is that no permit shall be required for the removal of soil, loam, sand, or gravel for any parcel of land where incidental to in connection with the construction of a building on the parcel. So you're stating that this installation of a shed was incidental.
It was necessary, we had to remove that in order to be able to place the shed to the back line of our property, which
Right.
I provided on the plan. For the building permit, I brought my plot plan, and I showed them exactly where the storage shed was gonna go according to the plot plan as
Right.
well,
So
which
was-
showed the grades on it.
Okay, so was the storage shed constructed on your property, or was it pre-made and then delivered to your property?
It's already set in our backyard, it's in existing.
Okay.
Prepared to go into the place after we excavated everything to move forward.
So it was an existing shed that was already on your property, it was just relocated?
Correct.
Okay. And so the permit that was issued by the building department, you say in your summary here that the permit would also cover the excavation landscaping required to install the storage shed on the premises. But it doesn't state that in the actual permit that was issued.
Oh, for the permit
Yeah,
itself,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's no place that it asks that.
So
Right.
when I had spoken with Stephen, after he had had the conversation with Roland, I just assumed to apply for, I was told to apply for this permit, and that would cover the basis for the excavation.
Is the shed there now?
And where, it's in my backyard, I have to, now, I'm waiting for a permit for the fencing, and then we're gonna place that in place.
Was it from where it is? I've seen pictures where it is now.
Yes, correct.
Where's that gonna go?
That's going to the back of the property line.
Is it still there?
Pardon me?
Is it still where it has been?
Yes, Chuck, yes, and it's gonna be moved to the back of the property line, which I applied for on the permit, on the drawing.
So, I guess, is this the shed?
That's the shed.
And so this is the shed right here?
Correct.
It's gonna be relocated, and where's it gonna be
It's
relocated?
gonna go to the, well, according to the,
About where your pen is.
about where your pen is, correct?
Right here?
Yes.
So, what?
Where? I didn't see it.
So it's gonna go here? So all that,
Along the right of way?
Pardon me?
Along the right of way, the easement?
Close to the easement, and I think, what is the setback, 10 or 15 from the back line?
10 feet, 52.
Yeah.
so all of that material had to be removed?
Yes, and I'm actually debating on putting a garage over there as well to store my cars.
Okay, but you don't have a permit yet for that?
No, not for that, no, but that's the ultimate plan.
Right.
So that's the motivation then, to excavate for a 16 by 17 shed.
I wanted to put the storage shed first, and then I
Oh, yeah.
thought about, since I'm giving the home to my son, and so I want to have a place to put my cars as well.
So, allow, if, Mr. Chairman, if I may, a little bit of confusion on my part. We have an existing shed that's being moved, and the discussion was around pulling a building permit to get around the soil removal bylaw? Because that's what I'm hearing, and I don't,
That's what it
sorry.
sounds like. The shed's already built,
Right.
and you're taking over the building
Sean,
permit.
tell them why you had to move the shed.
Well, so initially I had the shed, okay, on a yard purpose easement, okay, with my neighbors. They requested to move the shed, so I had no place in the backyard to place it, so I had to remove the hill in order to place it on my property. There was no place to put that storage shed in my backyard, because I was requested by my neighbors, my abutters, to remove it off the yard purpose easement. That's the whole reason I'm moving it. I had to take it down.
Where it is now is in the easement?
No, it's in my backyard. It's in my backyard.
Behind your garage?
Pardon me?
Behind your garage?
It's actually behind my house.
Behind the house.
Behind my house by the deck.
Okay.
But
I
Yeah,
just,
that's the garage.
is relocating, is
Yeah.
that even something that we need a permit for?
Yes, because I'm,
1 second, let the building inspector.
okay.
Assistant.
I would say no, because the shed was previously permitted. as long as he met the offsets, I mean, it would be advisable to come in and say, I'm moving the shed to a different spot in the lot and show where he's gonna move it, which, this was the plan that was submitted with the building permit application. It just showed the shed location, but no changes in grading. But he already had received a permit for the shed back many years ago when he originally installed the shed.
I'd just like to add that I think that's where the miscommunication came in good faith. He went to the building department to see what permits he needed to move the shed from here to there. Thought he had inquired about all the things you need to do and was actually given a building permit. Given that there was no new building being constructed, in his mind, he satisfied the permitting requirements for moving it from one location to another and excavating out to do that. I think that at some point he was told to go, or to talk about whether it was an earth removal permit was necessary, and I think he was led to the conclusion that he didn't need that. Had he known he needed that, he would have gone to that department first, he would have come to the selectmen first. When I read the earth removal permit bylaw, it seems that there are about 3 major reasons why the town has this bylaw. One is obviously for fees and costs so that you can monitor it and control it. Another is to make sure that the resulting slope is, I think it's less than 2 to 1. And also to make sure that the transport of materials over the roads is done in a way that's safe and secure. So we could address all, and to make sure that the yardage is under these cost engineers' estimates and the fees. So he can demonstrate to the board all of those things, pay for the fees, satisfy the board that the removal was done by Steve Breitmeyer in a safe manner over the road, so none of the sins of the bylaw were violated, and the intention was not to circumvent or skirt this board. He went in good intention to the building inspector to say, what do I need, and was told, you need a building permit.
But that's just not a reasonable conclusion.
Well, plus, we heard otherwise from the assistant building inspector that indeed, Shelley, you did tell, who did you tell that they should check for a soil removal permit at the selectman's office?
Not assistant building inspector.
Yes.
Well, Shelley said.
Yeah.
So
But
this,
anyway, well, can I ask you?
absolutely.
I had told Mr. Green that when he came
Yeah.
in, and again, it was a conversation
Okay.
with no specific.
So if it hadn't
as to-
occurred to you before then, you were at least being told by the building department you should go to the selectman's
And
office.
at that
to
point,
get
there
soil removal.
was, the discussion I had with him had nothing to do with a shed. He was talking about knocking a hill in his yard down, and it was the question
Right.
of whether it was grading and landscaping or earth removal. And I said, if it's grading and landscaping, you wouldn't need the permit, but if it's earth removal, you need to go to the selectmen and
Right.
see, because I didn't know if there was a minimum, you know, I knew no criteria for
Yeah,
that, and so, you know, I sent him over to see Diane.
Okay, thank you. So that was on your radar screen in any event?
So initially, okay, prior to discussing the storage shed being moved, okay, so the prior builder who had built our home, he buried a bunch of stumps, and had a wall there that was sinking in several spots. So initially, when I went to this woman here, the assistant building inspector, okay? I'm calling, zoning enforcement officer, okay? I had asked her, because I wanted to straighten out my backyard, okay? Where the concave was, because I had to remove the block. I wasn't gonna take out the hill at that time. This was just at that point for a landscaping aspect of it. Then in turn, when we had to move the storage shed, okay? Then that's when he went to Roland to discuss what we need to do. That was several weeks later.
How much soil was removed?
Approximately 1,500 yards.
And how many truckloads does that translate to?
75.
And that's incidental to moving a shed? I guess that's what we're being asked to believe.
That's what I'm gonna pile on here and say, like, that no reasonable person concludes that 75 dump trucks is incidental.
Can we just ask what kind of truck, what kind of truck are we talking about?
It's a triaxle.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
No reasonable person concludes that that's incidental to relocating a shed.
Can I just need some clarity, if I may? So this, You had a neighbor that requested a shed easement?
No.
How did it all come
So I had
together?
I had a yard purpose easement, okay, which I still have it in effect. But initially, I had that 16 by shed, okay, on that yard purpose easement. I was requested to remove it, okay? So at that time, I put it in the back of my home, okay, and I had no place to put it. So that's when, in turn, I had Steve speak with Roland, so we could then relocate the shed.
But the shed used to be in a different location.
Correct, Chuck.
And you moved it to where it is in these pictures. And you were planning to move it somewhere else on the property.
Correct.
And your contention, before that wall came down, that there was no other place to put that shed on your property?
Absolutely not. There was no space for it. Absolutely not.
So if you were to build this garage to house your vehicles, based upon the pictures and the plans we're looking at, where would that be built?
So you'd have the storage shed to the left, to the corner.
Towards the right-of-way and the utility easement?
Correct. And then I would look to put the storage, the garage in this area right here, Chuck.
Where the hill used to be?
Correct.
So there's concerns about runoff from the topography changing to move the shed. And if you were to, not saying that you would be granted the ability to build that shed, but if you were to build another structure on this property, you have that much more impervious material that is going to create more runoff, which would exacerbate a problem that I believe this excavation has presented for your immediate abutters in the rear with water runoff. And that topography change, and some of these drawings that we see, there's a 24, 26 inch change in slope on right along that utility easement.
So there was always a slope on the hill.
No,
There was a big hill.
I've been in that
A
yard.
lot of water coming down, a lot of water coming down prior. So it's not like we changed the amount of water flow that was coming down, in essence. There was always a tremendous amount of water that came down from an incline.
So, given the board's concern, would the board like him to get an engineered plan to show what the change in slope has done or is likely to do, so that you're satisfied that the concern for runoff is addressed? And there may be an engineering solution that will make sure that the neighbor is not impacted in any way, and kind of backtrack and undo what should have been done the first time, or do what should have been done in the first instance.
Well, it's 75 triplets late.
Yeah. I'm sorry to say it happened, and it's done. I wanted to bring the 75 truckloads back and start again.
You can ask the other members.
And I'd be willing to have that engineering survey taken care of.
I think there's
To
more
address the
than
concern.
just that needs to be done. It's bad practice to have exposed soil over the duration of the winter. Essentially, spring rains are gonna come, it's gonna wash the whole damn thing away. So not only does it need an engineering plan to take us back to zero, but there are mitigation measures that need to be implemented now, so that in the spring, it doesn't turn into a disaster for the butters.
It's not a problem.
I think he's perfectly willing to do that, Mr. Kirby.
Not a problem.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to get lost, or be lost in this discussion, impact on the neighbors, or I want to make sure if they have any input.
Also, Chris may have also have a comment at this point.
The only other thing I was going to add was to Chase's point, is that when someone applies for a permit, you impose a bond. You make sure there's a bond that's put in place to make sure that all the work is done appropriately at the end of the process. So I think that, I understand an application has now been applied for, but in addition to requiring all the work get done, or rather, engineering reports come in to show that the work that was done is consistent with general engineering practice, and all of the, 19 odd criteria for issuance of a permit in your regulations, I would suggest that the board also has the power to impose a bond so that that's in place come spring, so that we know, not only on paper with the engineering that this is going to be okay, but on the ground, as a practical matter, it's okay in the spring.
I think everyone's comments have presumed that the engineering will come back and say that this is okay. I mean, some of the language in this is not trivial, requirements that the area of drainage does not increase at any one point is integral here. So I don't think we go into this with the presumption that the current condition is in fact acceptable. The engineering plans would have to both identify the current condition as well as conditions required to remedy any failures to comply with the existing, to comply with what would have been a permit given out originally.
Anyone in the public have any comments?
Dutcher, 62 Spectacle Pond Road. First off, I had him move the shed off of the usage easement, which I gave him when he bought the house, because it said in the easement, no structures, which he did anyways, including the paved turnaround. I had to remove that off my land. For him to say that he has not increased water flow to my property is false. He's increased it by at least 100%. There's a catch basin on the property line, which his backyard was pitched to before for that purpose. If he wanted to take the hill down, move the shed, whatever, that's fine. But the whole yard could have been pitched towards that catch basin and not created this whole problem. And on top of that, he dug into the utility easement, taking it down approximately 2 feet, which may have exposed my water line to frost. So that needs to be fixed now.
So it has been brought to my attention as of today by someone local here that his driveway very well might not be placed correctly according to the plan, so I've contacted Ross and Associates, because it appears that his driveway and the easement that he has on the plan is not accurately placed. So I've contacted Ross and Associates to go out there and mark out where the driveway should be placed and the utility easement.
Any easement is going to be recorded in the registry of deeds.
Understood. So, but apparently when they placed the driveway, as they did with, they actually had some planting, and their septic vent was actually on our property initially, and they had to remove that as well.
Mr. Sanders?
George Sanders, 672 Great Wood. Did I understand they moved 75 truckloads of loom from the location?
75 truckloads of soil, I don't know what.
Soil? Okay. To move a shed, in my opinion, just using common sense, if you're moving on your property and you know that you got to move that much dirt, I would think that, first of all, you said it didn't cost anything to move it. Did he have a contractor? Did he have engineers to do any of the study that was required there to relocate that shed on that property? Because 75 truckloads of soil is a lot of soil, and that sounds like a circumvent of a condition here that they was moving.
I agree, Mr. Sanders. I guess one, to Mr. Brightmeyer, you do this for a living, right? I just find this is confusing to me, because I've been in construction different times too. How you would think you could just take 75 loads of soil out without.
I went there to ask if there was a permit that we needed to remove it. And when I talked to Roland, I told him exactly what we were gonna do. And he said, from what and I don't wanna put words in his mouth, but I think the way he interpreted, the way he read it, is for what we were doing, we don't need one. We were not running a gravel operation or anything. We were just going in there to take the soil out so he could make a backyard and put a shed there.
It's incumbent upon you as the contractor or the property owner, not incumbent upon the building inspector in a sidebar conversation to determine whether or not something has to be done. So the buck stops with one of you, frankly.
So would you consider mitigation has to happen right away, as you pointed out, Mr. Gerbic, for the frost? But also, you want us to come back to the next meeting with the items checked off, as council says, and addressed for the other items on the permit application. And then when we see what work needs to be done at your next meeting, you know, if a bond is necessary and you think that's appropriate, you can impose it. But I think that the mitigation that Chase talked about ought to happen right away.
It'll happen tomorrow. It'll be done tomorrow.
I think we need to include the, on that utility easement, if in fact, we
So if you look at the photos that we've showed you, or with my photos of the original, how it originally looked, we did not cut into that. So
To
that's
the
it.
water department.
And I went to the water department today, and they actually came out here, and they actually brought to
what
my.
did DigSafe say?
Dig said?
Yeah.
You have it in your
That's-
file.
That's in, that's in the blue book.
It's in the blue book,
Says-
that we, because we were told we didn't pull a dig,
They
call
only
dig said.
located, looks like they only located a Comcast.
Comcast cable, that was it. In
Well,
that
no,
area.
that's just the one they sent.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to show the dig safe number.
So that's where, in this packet?
Right, about four pages in, his narrative, and then the building permit, and then the ticket from Dixon.
So back in the, when the water department was out there, actually the gentleman who initially installed the system, the water back there into all Giamo's properties, he said back at that time, all they had was the tape, and they didn't have the wire where they can identify where the water line is at that time, now, as they can now. But he did suggest that we could hand dig down there just to prove that it is down there in an accurate space.
And we need to do that. This is for Comcast. It shows that DigSafe came on and identified Comcast, but it doesn't show any other utilities within that easement, right?
Right. When I called dig safe, we had silt fence around the whole area. So I told them all the work was going to be done inside the silt fence. They came out, they said there was nothing inside the silt fence that we had to worry about. Somebody went and took all the silt fence down afterwards, a couple of different times.
On 2 different occasions.
But we weren't digging down, you know, when I'm near a driveway, I've done this long enough that I'm not gonna dig down to see if there's any, I don't wanna hit any wires or anything that could be there.
DigSafe is notoriously unreliable, particularly where it comes to municipal utilities. I think it still makes sense to hand dig and identify the depth of the water line.
I thought I just heard Mr. Green say that the water department can now do that with instrumentation until exactly.
My understanding with Mr.
No.
Green is that this was not,
So
it doesn't have a trace.
it doesn't have the trace line, it just has the trace tape, which goes down approximately, I believe you said 3 feet, 3 feet up from where the pipe is. So we can dig down and find out, I can do it.
Yeah, I mean, if
Stevie.
you've got a trace tape on it, then you know where to dig, it's not a.
That's not a problem.
Shouldn't be a big imposition.
I'll have Steve over there with me this week. I'll put the hay bales and the silt fence all along the perimeter. I'll have that done tomorrow.
Please give us, with the information that you're gonna provide at our next meeting, some documentation of that, you know, just a
Absolutely.
tape measure picture, so we have a
Absolutely.
sense of that stuff.
Absolutely.
If you're talking to Ross Associates about the driveway,
So if that's the case, if their driveway's not in the proper position according to the plans, that's gonna have to be moved, the driveway.
my point I was trying to make was that you're gonna have an engineer out there, can he start taking a look at?
That's the same engineer who I'm gonna have do
Yeah,
all this.
I wasn't talking about the driveway, I'm not concerned about that right now, I'm concerned about your yard.
Absolutely.
I wanna make sure that when Ross, whoever you hire, goes out there and starts.
Geological and everything else.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Because he's the one who just did the survey over there, so he's very familiar with the property.
So, Counsel.
I didn't hear you finish your statement. You want Ross to identify the geology and the
Geology, the drainage,
location and the
if we
drainage.
go to the drainage,
Everything,
Just wanna make
the
it
grade
clear.
was significantly changed. So, to try to, return it to some degree back to, some that it's not gonna impact the.
I think you have a challenge, Mr. Green, in that it's going to be difficult for you to comply with the requirements of the permit that you don't change the drainage in any homes. And that's why I bring up the argument that we're really going to be looking at this based on the original conditions, not, the improvement of conditions today. So when you do have your engineer out there, I will be looking towards that next step. Are there additional grading measures or additional soil that I may need to bring back on site to bring this grading back to, or bring this drainage back to the original conditions, rather than just validate that.
I'm sure Steve can work with Ross to be able to
I'm sure
accommodate that.
it can be solved, and it probably doesn't involve bringing back 1,500 cubic yards of material, but it may.
No, but we're gonna be, so,
Can I just add a quick comment, which is, I want the board to be a little careful about what it's telling the property owner to go out and do in the field. Because I think what the board needs eventually is a fully engineered set of plans, both showing what used to be there and showing what they're gonna do to stabilize the current site going forward. If we're talking about sending them out to go, put hay bales on the property line and do things that are, clearly going to help and not further disturb the site, I think those are instructions that we can send the property owner off with. I just don't want the board I don't necessarily want the board, however, to be instructing them to go out there and do further grading, further moving earth around and stuff like that. Because what you need, and I think what you should demand, get filed with you in short order, if it wasn't filed with the application form you've got, is a restoration plan that fully complies with your regulations that you could approve tomorrow if you had them tonight. So I think, I just want to be clear about the homework that you're sending them off with tonight, is to stabilize the site without much in the way of further disturbance, and to come back, if they haven't already filed them, with a fully engineered set of plans that satisfy every last letter of your earth removal regulations.
So, agreed, that was what was suggested. My only concern and comment is you meet every 2 weeks? How often was your meeting?
December 2nd as it stands.
Because with the holiday, I just don't know if the engineering can be done as fast as your next meeting. He can put the hay bales in and he can make sure that the water department confirms, and we can show you that at the next meeting. But I think the full restoration and fix might not be ready for that next meeting. So bear with us while we get the right engineering done for you.
Anything else on the board tonight?
Well, it sounds reasonable to me.
If I may, just one thing, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's a good idea.
if the procedure had been followed according to the bylaws, we would have had a removal site plan presented before the board. We would have had a hearing, we would have discussed it, but that did not take place. That being said, under our bylaws, there are terms and conditions and restrictions subject to earth removal permits, and there's certain provisions within those restrictions that I think that we need to pay attention to with whatever we charge the parties here with, as far as bringing an engineer in and doing work on that site. So they're set forth in our bylaws. I think we need to take a look at those as well and have the engineer come back to us using these as a guideline as well.
That's what we're offering.
Yeah.
That's what we understand to be the case.
Okay.
I
just want to be clear on that.
He'll have Ross go through it, and that's what Attorney Hughes said to us, make sure the 19 items on the bylaw are addressed.
Right.
So that's what he's gonna be doing.
Right. I just want to be clear on that.
Yeah, no problem.
We're all set, move forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Keeping the hearing open, I would suggest.
So we need a date, time, location certain, and I would recommend that the board continue the hearing to, I was gonna try to pull up my draft for the December 2nd, but I can't. In lieu of that, I would suggest 8 PM as well, so I would recommend that the board move to continue the soil removal hearing to December 2nd at 8 PM we can, if the information is not available by that date, we can always continue the hearing to another date, time, location certain, here in room 103 of the 37 Shattuck Street, Littleton, Mass.
Second.
Motion been made and second, all those in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Joe.
All right. Thank you all. Good to see you.
Apparently, we're gonna be talking soon, Chris?
Yeah.
Getting back very quickly, Mr. Chairman, to the property tax classification hearing. I do have the excess levy capacity number. The number is $3,654.60.
3654.
3654.60.
Just crunch that long in.
I did long division, and then I did,
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to MGL Chapter 40, Section 56, relative to the fiscal year 2020 property tax to identify $3,654.60 in unused property tax levy capacity.
Second. Motion been made and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
And number 10, town administrator, looks like you're looking for just one item, okay.
yes, one
Times and
item,
meetings?
then I have two minor add-on items.
Well,
I know, I'm the only one holding you. You can tell me no. So for the upcoming meetings, a list of the meetings proposed is in front of you. We do lift heavy, quite a number of proposed meetings in April, which may or may not be typical. I certainly see a scenario by which we could set these dates, hold them on our calendar, and if there's not any important business, that we can defer them to another day. But especially considering the fact that I will be going through my first Littleton town meeting, I would certainly appreciate your help in any setting of meetings to make sure that we've got all of our ducks in a row in preparation for that town meeting.
So just vote and then you can always amend it.
Right.
And I also would point out that May 4th is the town meeting, obviously, and then I did skip a week in June for June 15th. The board can arrange those in any way that it sees fit.
That looks good.
That looks good to me.
It's awesome.
Move the Board of Selectmen vote to ratify, to approve January through June 2020 meeting schedule as indicated.
Second.
Motion been made and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
The second to last item at this point is, there is an EEA grant that in part Paul had mentioned earlier to go over transfer development rights for an amount of $15,000 and, sorry, $20,000 of EEA funds for that. And then form-based code for $15,000, some public outreach for $7,500, and a training budget of $7,500, all of which should amount, but don't seem to amount, to $50,000. Somewhere in all of this is a $50,000 number. That's right, 20,000, 15, I apologize, another 15. There's the $50,000, which I'm seeking the board's approval to enter into a grant agreement on. As the board knows, we are planning to modify our policies on town administrators' ability to sign grants at some point in the future, but we haven't yet done that. I don't necessarily need a motion, more so I want to let you know that I'll be doing it if you don't object.
And I presume these meet sort of the requirements we talked about last week. Doesn't tie us to the requirement to spend additional money should we get these grants.
Yes. And then the last item, if I may, is this past weekend, I had the pleasure of attending an event by the Indonesian Three Magnolias here in Littleton. They're a nonprofit organization that benefits children and women in Indonesia for educational purposes. And they had a wonderful cultural and event that included food, dance, and a fashion show, and I was really delighted with some of the work that they did. Their event was in the First Baptist Church, and good for them.
Good for you, for attending.
And the last item is minutes.
Mr. Chairman, on the minutes, I don't know, I brought this up a month or two ago. I don't know if there's somebody different doing these or not, but there's not much captured in any of the deliberations, pretty much mostly motions and votes, and, you know, a lot of times members will make a remark on a topic specifically to get it into the record, make sure it's there, or at least that in part is part of the reason. So, however they were being done 6 months ago was, or a year ago was fine. I don't know, sometimes there are different people fill in and do them, they do them differently, but I don't know what the status is in that right now, but I'd like that message to be carried back.
A little more narrative.
Yeah.
Be glad to share that. I can definitely share that. It's difficult probably to capture. Let's, perhaps one thing we could do is, if a member wishes for a specific thing to be noted, if it's possible, not always is expected, but if you were to potentially say, I'd like that to be in the minutes, or please, for the minutes, that may be helpful in this process, because
Fine, but that's not always the drive.
Of course.
I'd say it's as simple as this. What was being done before was fine. Now they're, you know, it's down to a page and a half.
Yeah, okay, I'll
All
have
you
to
need to
look
do is go
into.
back and look at how they were.
Okay.
Everything was fine except for the 5-month delay in getting them to us.
Yes.
Which I think is not unrelated. There's got to be some happy medium between getting them out to the public relatively.
But they become a part of the
expeditiously.
permanent record, so I'd rather have them full and a little late in getting to us, although I'd rather they not be late getting to us either.
Sure.
Yeah.
I agree.
Because, you know.
I want both. I want it all.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm with you. I'm more willing to.
I'm
take
aware, I'm aware of this video, but at some point that can disappear, and nobody's under any obligation to retain that. The minutes are the minutes, yeah.
Yep.
So duly noted.
Noted, yep.
Motion to adjourn?
Well, I guess first one.
Yeah. They're okay as is, by the way, as
To
you know.
approve the meeting minutes of October 24th and November 4th, 2019.
Second.
Motion been made and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Get that one.
Motion been made and second, all those in favor?
Now.
Thank you very much for watching.
Second.